Hi guys, my name is Jessie and this is my story. My life has never been easy. Born to a poor mother and a father who abandoned us, I grew up with a chip on my shoulder. Now I'm 18 years old. I lived with my maternal grandparents in a small, cluttered house in a quiet suburb. Over the years, I had grown to be a tall, lean young man with a keen interest in books and an affinity for solitude. Although my grandparents provided me with love and support, I couldn't help but feel the void left by my parents. The story of my parents' divorce was a familiar one. My mother, Isabella, had been a kind and caring woman, while my father, Richard, was a workaholic businessman who prioritized wealth over family. When my mother became pregnant, Richard accused her of trying to trap him and left her for another woman. The bitterness and resentment of that abandonment weighed heavily on my heart. When I was only 7 years old, my mother had passed away, leaving me with my grandparents. The pain of losing her had been unbearable, and the circumstances surrounding her death were shrouded in mystery. One ordinary afternoon, as I was returning home from school, I noticed an unfamiliar black car parked outside my grandparents' house. My heart raced as I approached the front door, feeling a strange sense of unease. I hesitated for a moment before turning the doorknob and stepping inside. "Alex, dear," my grandmother called from the living room. "There is someone here who wants to speak with you." I entered the room to find a middle-aged man in a dark suit sitting on their worn-out couch. The man introduced himself as Mr. Davis, a lawyer representing Richard Thompson. I felt a surge of anger at the mention of my father's name, but managed to hold my anger. "I apologize for the intrusion," Mr. Davis said, "but your father has requested to see you. He's gravely ill and doesn't have much time left." The news hit me like a ton of bricks, leaving me speechless. The room seemed to close in on me as a flurry of emotions washed over my mind. I felt anger, confusion, and a strange sense of relief that my father was finally getting my just desserts. After a moment of silence, I gathered my thoughts and replied, "I need some time to think about this." Mr. Davis nodded understandingly, handing me a business card. "Take your time, and when you're ready, give me a call." As the lawyer left, I retreated to my small bedroom, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. I wanted nothing more than to forget about my father, but a small part of me yearned for closure. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder if meeting my father would finally have me let go of the past, or if it would only deepen the wounds that had never truly healed. After several sleepless nights, I finally decided to face my dying father. Despite the bitterness in my heart, I couldn't shake the need for closure. With a heavy sigh, I dialed Mr. Davis' number and arranged a meeting. The following day, I found myself standing outside a luxurious mansion, my heart pounding in my chest. The opulence of my father's home only fueled my anger. It was a painful reminder of how Richard had chosen a life of wealth over my own family. With a deep breath, I knocked on the massive oak door. A nurse greeted me and led me through the lavishly decorated home. As we walked down the long, dimly lit hallway, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. Finally, we reached the bedroom where my father lay, frail and weak, surrounded by expensive medical equipment. As I approached the bed, my father managed a weak smile. "Alex," he croaked, "I'm so glad you came." Our eyes met, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of regret in my father's eyes. But it wasn't enough to erase years of resentment. "Why?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Why did you abandon us?" Richard hesitated, tears welling in his eyes. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted. "I was selfish, And I thought I didn't want a family, but I never stopped thinking about you and your mother." Before I could respond, the bedroom door opened, and a well-dressed woman entered, followed by a teenage girl around my age. The woman introduced herself as Richard's wife, Evelyn, and the girl as their daughter, Lily. My stomach churned as I realized this was my stepmother and stepsister. Evelyn's cold gaze bored into me, making me feel unwelcome and out of place. I couldn't help but notice how Lily stared at me with a mix of curiosity and fear, likely influenced by her mother's perception of me. As the conversation continued, the tension in the room grew. I struggled to maintain my composure, feeling the weight of years of unspoken words and unresolved feelings. My father's weak apologies and explanations did little to soothe the anger that festered within me. Before leaving, Richard made a final request. I know I can't undo the past, but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I love you, son." My words hung in the air as I left the room, unable to respond. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness, unsure if the meeting had brought me any closer to healing my emotional wounds. As I left the mansion, I couldn't help but notice the way Evelyn watched me, her eyes filled with contempt. I had a sinking feeling that my father's impending death would only mark the beginning of a new set of challenges. Little did I know just how right I was. A few weeks after our first meeting, my father passed away. The news left me feeling more lost than ever. While part of me was glad the source of my pain was gone, another part felt unmoored, as though a chapter in my life had been torn off, leaving me to piece together the remnants. The funeral was a somber affair, and I found myself surrounded by strangers, all mourning a man they had never truly known. I watched as my stepmother and stepsister clung to each other. They grieved genuine but tainted by a calculating air that left me uneasy. Following the funeral, Mr. Davis, the family lawyer, summoned my father's relatives, including me, to discuss the contents of the will. The atmosphere in the room was tense, with many in attendance uncertain of what to expect. As Mr. Davis began reading the legal document, the room felt silent, and all eyes were on me. To everyone's astonishment, Richard had left a substantial portion of my estate to me, including several properties and a sizable financial inheritance. The unexpected windfall should have been a blessing, an opportunity for me to forge a new path and build a better life for myself. However, as I looked around the room, I saw the jealousy and resentment in the eyes of my father's other relatives, particularly in the cold gaze of the stepmother, Evelyn. Evelyn wasted no time in contesting the will, her true nature becoming apparent. Her actions confirmed my suspicions. She was after my father's wealth, and she would stop at nothing to secure it for herself and Lily, regardless of the consequences. One night, as I lay in my bed trying to make sense of everything, I overheard a hushed phone conversation between Evelyn and an unidentified person. Their words were laced with menace, and a shiver ran down my spine as I realized they were planning to kidnap me. With me out of the picture, Evelyn would have a clear path to my father's fortune, and there would be no one to challenge her claim. Panicking, I knew I had to act quickly. I couldn't go to the police without solid evidence, and confronting my stepmother directly would only put me in even greater danger. I had no choice but to leave and go into hiding. Gathering my belongings, I hastily packed a small bag with only the essentials, taking care to avoid making any noise that might alert Evelyn or Lily. I scribbled a note to my grandparents, explaining the situation and promising to contact them when it was safe. I also left a message for Lily, hoping that she might see through her mother's deception and understand my actions. As I slipped out of the house under the cover of darkness, I felt as if I were entering a nightmare from which there was no escape. I didn't know who I could trust or where I could turn for help, but one thing was certain. I would have to stay one step ahead of Evelyn and her sinister plan if I hoped to survive and protect the legacy my father had left me. In the following days, I moved on from one town to another, doing my best to stay under the radar. I slept in motels, using the small amount of cash I had managed to grab before leaving. I knew it wouldn't last forever, but I hoped it would buy me enough time to figure out my next move. As I traveled, I realized that the threat against me was greater than I had initially thought. Evelyn had hired a professional hitman to track me down. As I continued to evade capture, I realized that I needed allies if I was going to survive. I reached out to Mr. Davis, the family lawyer, hoping that the man might be able to help me uncover the truth about Evelyn's schemes. To my surprise, Mr. Davis agreed to help, risking his own safety to gather evidence against my stepmother. With Mr. Davis' help, I began to piece together the puzzle of my father's death and the lengths to which Evelyn was willing to go to secure my inheritance. I knew that the road ahead would be filled with danger and uncertainty, but I was determined to see the truth brought to light. Lily struggled with the absence of her stepbrother. As much as she wanted to believe her mother's claims that I was dangerous, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The look in my eyes when we had first met had been filled with pain and confusion, not malice. The note I left behind only deepened her suspicions. Determined to uncover the truth, Lily began her own investigation. She searched her mother's belongings when she wasn't home, hoping to find any evidence that would confirm her suspicions. What she found was shocking. Documents revealing the plan to kidnap me and a series of payments to a professional hitman. The reality hit her like a ton of bricks. Her mother was not the person she thought she was. Frightened and overwhelmed, Lily knew she couldn't confront her mother alone. She reached out to me using the contact information I had left in my note. Unexpectedly, we are separated by distance, but united by a common goal, began to work together, evidenced against Evelyn, and to expose her sinister plot. Through our combined efforts, we managed to gather enough evidence to prove that Evelyn has orchestrated the plot to kidnap me and had hired the hitman to eliminate me. With the help of Mr. Davis, we prepared to take the evidence to the authorities and bring the stepmother to justice. The day had come for me and Lily to confront our stepmother, armed with the evidence we had gathered together. As we prepared to meet, both were filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. We knew the stakes were high, but we also knew that we had come too far to back down now. Under the guise of a family dinner, the siblings arranged to confront Evelyn at the mansion. As we sat around the table, the tension in the room was palpable. Me and Lily exchanged glances, silently reassuring each other that we were ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the meal came to an end, I stood up and addressed the room. My voice was steady as I laid out the evidence against Evelyn, detailing her plans to kidnap me and her dealings with the hitman. I revealed how Lily has discovered the truth and had been working with me to gather the necessary proof. Evelyn's face contorted with rage as her carefully laid plans unraveled before her eyes. She tried to deny the accusations, but her words rang hollow in the face of the evidence against her. The room was filled with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and anger as the family members struggled to come to terms with what we had learned. As the confrontation reached its climax, the hitman, who had been waiting outside for a long time, realized that everything has unfolded and I had to act now. He burst into the room, gun in hand. The chaos had ensued was a blur. Screams filled the air as everyone scrambled for cover. Me and Lily locked eyes, realizing the gravity of the situation. In that moment, Lily made a split-second decision that would change our lives forever. She threw herself in front of me, shielding me from the hitman's bullet. The impact sent her crashing to the floor, blood pooling around her as her life slipped away. In her final moments, she looked up at me as if she wanted to say sorry. She had chosen to protect me, even at the cost of her own life. Seeing her daughter's lifeless body on the floor, Evelyn's facade of control crumbled. Overwhelmed by guilt, grief, and the realization of the consequences of her actions, she took her own life, unable to face the devastation she had brought. In the aftermath of the tragic events, I found myself grappling with the enormity of the loss and the whirlwind of emotions that came with it. My stepsister was gone, and the revelation of my stepmother's twisted actions had left a dark shadow over what had remained of my family. However, through it all, the memory of my mother's last wish continued to resonate with me. I knew that I had a responsibility to honor my mother's final request, to bury my father beside her, so they could rest together for eternity. As I made the arrangements, I felt a sense of closure, knowing that I was fulfilling a promise to my mother and bringing peace to her memory. With the inheritance for my father now secure, I decided to use the money to make a positive impact on the lives of others. Inspired by the selflessness and courage Lily had shown in her final moments, I established a charitable foundation in her name, dedicated to helping vulnerable children and providing support for families affected by crime and tragedy. Through my actions and determination, I created a legacy of hope, healing, and love. I became the person of my mother had always believed I could be, proving that even in the darkest of time, it is possible to find light and create a brighter future for oneself and for others.